Hello on a beautiful sunny day here in Kampala in Uganda. This is the country that I live in right now. It is a beautiful place, and I'm coming to you from my porch here to share some thoughts from the Bible with you this week. On Monday, if you watched that video, I talked a little bit about the temple of God that Solomon built to bring glory to God. And I talked about how actually this time in the Bible was a pretty good time for the nation of Israel. They were prospering. They had lots of riches. Silver was as common as stones. They had plenty to eat. They were at peace. They weren't fighting all the time as they had been in the rule of David and before him with the judges. It seemed like the promises that God had spoken over the nation of Israel had finally come to pass. These people were doing really, really well. They prospered. And this kind of brought attention to the king of this people, Solomon, and, to the nation itself. And other foreign dignitaries and rulers and leaders started to come and visit Israel to see for themselves what was happening amongst this nation. And one of those people who came to visit was a woman who we know only as the Queen of Sheba. Now, we don't actually know all that much about this mysterious person. Some historians suggest that she would have come from what is modern-day Yemen. Others think that she probably came from Ethiopia. She may well have been an African queen. Wherever she did come from though, I think that she would not have known, certainly not personally have known, the God of the people of Israel. She may have heard rumors about him, about the parting of the Red Sea, about how the people were delivered from slavery in Egypt, how they conquered the land of Canaan with these incredible victories, at cities like Jericho, the walls that crashed down to nothing. But there would have been no personal knowledge, no intimate knowledge of who God was. She came from a distant land. But how amazing it is then, I think this is just wonderful, that this is what the Queen of Sheba had to say about everything she saw in Israel. It's found in 2 Chronicles chapter 9 and verse 8. And it says this: "Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on his throne as king to rule for the Lord your God. Because of the love of your God and for Israel and his desire to uphold them forever, he has made you king over them to maintain justice and righteousness." The Queen of Sheba was clearly impressed by what she saw. We read that in the Bible. She was impressed by the wealth, by even the way that servants were dressed in Solomon's palace. She was impressed by his wisdom, by the temple of God. On looking at this man and all that he had achieved, she didn't say what I think many of us would say in that situation. She didn't look at Solomon and say, "Oh, Solomon, how mighty you are. Look at everything you have achieved. You have done really, really well for yourself here." She said, "Praise be to the Lord your God, who has done all of this for you." This woman, whoever she was, went from what I assume was a kind of an academic knowledge of God. She went from that to praising him for his goodness to his people. I would love to know how this little visit to Israel impacted the rest of her life. I wonder, when she went home to her people, wherever home was, did she go and tell them about this living God in the land of Israel? I wonder how it changed her. I wonder if she continued to praise and worship God because she had seen something so different to anything she had ever seen before. I wonder if she told the people that she met about this God who had so much love for his people that he desired to uphold them forever. What a incredible witness that would have been for people to have heard about this God. So how amazing it would be then if people could look at our lives and say something similar, if they could look at our achievements and the things that we have and the things that we do, if they could look at the way that we live our lives and say, wow, there is no explanation here except for the living God being a part of their life. Look how much God has blessed them. Something about the way that Solomon lived pointed the Queen of Sheba not to him, but to God. The Bible tells us that he showed her more than just his palace and his riches and his wealth, but also the temple where God's name was glorified and lifted up. He showed her the burnt offerings that happened every single day in worship. In both his words and his actions, in the things that he did, the things that he had built and achieved, he advertised his God to the Queen of Sheba. What a great challenge that is for us, to let not only our words, but also our actions, the way that we live our lives, be a testimony to God, to God's amazing mercy and grace. Can we show people who God is by the way that we live our lives, even if we don't have the opportunity to have a conversation with them about who he is? Can we be a people who are generous, who live in unity with one another, who ooze peace and joy, regardless of how difficult the situations may be that we're facing? What would that say to people who don't yet know God? Perhaps they would look at us and say, do you know what? I have absolutely no explanation for how they are managing to stay peaceful in the midst of a global pandemic. I don't understand how they can be so authentic that they can admit that things are hard and yet confess to having a peace that surpasses it all, that rules over the situations that they are facing. There must be something that I don't understand that is going on in their lives, and it can only be God. What an amazing witness that would be. Just as Solomon was kind of on display, if you like, to the Queen of Sheba, this visiting monarch, we are on display as well as Christians. People are watching us. They're watching to see our reactions. When you say you're a Christian, they're watching to see if the way that you live your life lines up with what you say you believe in. Your life can be an example that points people towards the living God, or that points people away from him. As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, you are to let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Not you. You're not supposed to get the glory. That's for God. I encourage you today, why don't you ask yourself, if somebody looked at my life, what would they see? Would it point people towards God? Would it point people away from God? And what can I do to change that? Thank you so much for joining me again. I'll see you next time.